Imagine a criminal so brilliant, so calculating, and so utterly fearless that his life reads less like a police report and more like the script of a Hollywood blockbuster. A phantom who didn't just rob banks, but turned the very concept of global security into his own personal playground. On May 15, 2004, heavily armed tactical teams rushed to a massive, brand-new bank in Canada, certain they were responding to a routine false alarm. But what the police didn't know was that just a few blocks away, sitting in the shadows inside a rented minivan, the mastermind behind the break-in was listening to their every word. He wasn't running in panic. He was sitting comfortably, wearing a headset tuned directly into the encrypted police tactical frequency. He knew their exact response times down to the very second. By the time the officers cleared the building, the vault was completely empty, and the thief had vanished into the night with $750,000. This is the story of a man who orchestrated complex frauds across 3 different continents. A man who literally parachuted onto the roof of an imperial palace to steal a priceless crown jewel. A mastermind who bypassed the most sophisticated, state-of-the-art alarms using children's toys. And what makes this story truly bizarre? He possessed a profound psychological need to document his undeniable brilliance, recording almost all of his illegal life on video, just like a modern-day vlogger.
October, the 2nd of October. This is a commitment. I'm staying out of trouble in Claysville, make sure. I am. Thank you.
But here is the ultimate twist. The man who outsmarted every camera, every laser grid, every vault, and every seasoned detective was eventually brought down by a mistake so incredibly foolish, so mind-bogglingly amateurish, that you will struggle to believe it actually happened. How did a scrawny, bullied, nerdy kid transform into the most creative criminal in modern history? And what was the singular, careless error that finally exposed his global empire? You will have to watch until the very end to find out, because I promise you, the truth behind this man's downfall is stranger than any fiction you've ever seen. We really put a lot of effort and time into making this documentary. By liking the video and subscribing to the channel, you'll be giving us real support. If everything's ready, let's get started. Before we can understand the mind of the man, you need to understand the absolute audacity of his myth. It is June of 1998. Our mastermind is in Vienna, Austria, supposedly on a luxurious European vacation with his new wife and his wealthy German father-in-law. But while his family is admiring the architecture, his mind is executing complex mathematical equations. Inside a cavernous room in the Schönbrunn Palace, resting on a weight-sensitive pedestal behind thick, bulletproof glass, sat the Kochert diamond pearl, widely known to the world as the CC star. It was a legendary, 10-pointed, diamond-encrusted star surrounding a monstrous pearl, originally crafted in 1864 to be worn in the famously long, flowing hair of Empress Elizabeth of Austria. It was a national treasure, worth an estimated $2 million. To a normal person, stealing it was an impossibility. But our thief possessed a rare psychological trait known as the quiet eye, an enhanced visual perception born from intense concentration that allows a person to minimize all distractions and focus entirely on structural flaws. While the tour guide spoke, he was mentally mapping the camera blind spots, the exact sweep of the motion sensors, and the specific type of screws holding the bulletproof glass case together. He even audaciously filmed the "No Cameras" sign with his camcorder just for the thrill of it. A few nights later, he rented a small Cessna plane. A mile above the palace, in the dead of night, he opened the airplane door, checked his straps, and parachuted directly onto the unguarded roof of the castle. He plummeted through the darkness, pulling his cord and steering his canopy toward the tiled roof. He slid down the palace facade, broke through a window he had secretly unlatched during his daytime tour, and crept into the silent treasure room. He carefully unscrewed the display case. Now came the ultimate cinematic test. The jewel sat on a highly sensitive weight sensor. Like a scene ripped straight out of Indiana Jones, he held a cheap replica he had bought from the palace gift shop in one hand, and the real diamond in the other. In one fluid, breathless motion, he swapped them. The alarm didn't make a single sound. He vanished into the night. And the most mind-blowing part of this entire operation? It took the palace officials 2 full weeks to even realize that the diamond on display was a fake. Who was capable of this level of precision? Who had the nerve to skydive onto a royal palace for a piece of jewelry he couldn't even sell? The world and international law enforcement were about to find out. His name was Gerald Daniel Blanchard. To truly understand Gerald Blanchard, we have to rewind the tape. Born in Winnipeg, Canada in 1972, Gerald was adopted and later moved to the harsh environment of Omaha, Nebraska, with his adoptive mother Carol and his sister. Gerald wasn't the tough, intimidating mobster-type guy you'd expect to find in the criminal underworld. He was a skinny, bespectacled kid who struggled with dyslexia and a severe speech impediment, but his brain was wired completely differently than the other kids. By the age of 8, he was dismantling alarm clocks and VCRs just to map their gear trains and circuits. His mother frequently found stacks of disassembled radios hidden under his bed. Every device was a locked door, and Gerald wanted to be the key. Life in Nebraska was incredibly unforgiving. His mother worked multiple jobs but still couldn't make ends meet. Gerald recalled heartbreaking moments, listening to his mother cry on the phone, desperately begging the bank not to foreclose on their home over a minor shortfall. Things got so devastatingly bad that they didn't even have milk for their cereal. Gerald actually had to use ginger ale instead. This crushing poverty ignited something dark and rebellious inside him. To survive, he began sneaking onto neighbors' porches and stealing their delivered milk. That small, successful theft gave him a massive adrenaline rush. It was his first taste of bypassing the rules, and he was instantly hooked. By his teenage years, Gerald shifted his focus from stealing milk to stealing high-end electronics. He targeted Radio Shack, not just shoplifting items, but creating masterfully forged receipts using the school photocopier to return the stolen goods for cold, hard cash. He was so wildly successful at this that on one Easter Sunday, he disconnected a store's alarm system, backed up a moving truck, and completely emptied the entire Radio Shack inventory. At the age of 16, using his illicit earnings, he managed to buy a $100,000 house for his mother, paying entirely in cash. But Gerald's true legendary status among law enforcement began with his impossible escapes. When he was 21, he was arrested in Iowa for suspected arson after helping a friend burn a car for the insurance money. Sitting alone in an interrogation room at the police station past midnight, Gerald noticed the drop ceiling. Left unshackled, he climbed onto the metal table, pushed aside an acoustic tile, and hoisted himself up into the ceiling vents. He army crawled through the dark ductwork, dropped down into a storage room, and simply walked out the back door. He even stopped to steal a police officer's coat, a badge, a radio, and a revolver as souvenirs, leaving a bullet with a smiley face drawn on it on the detective's desk. The next morning, heavily armed SWAT teams raided his mother's house, using flash grenades to flush him out of the attic. But the police underestimated him once more. Placed in the back of a police cruiser with his hands cuffed tightly behind his back, Gerald contorted his body, sliding his cuffed hands under his legs to the front. With the officer distracted, Gerald slipped into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and drove away in the stolen police car, leading them on a massive high-speed chase. He was eventually caught, served his time, and was deported back to Canada in 1997. He arrived at the border with nothing but $10. But instead of taking the bus, he bought a $9 disposable camera, stole a second one, photocopied the receipt for 10 cents, and returned both for cash. By the end of the day, he had hundreds of dollars. Inside his mind, the blueprint for a global criminal empire was already forming. But to pull off his grandest, most cinematic schemes, Gerald couldn't do it entirely alone. He built a tight-knit crew. There was Angela James, his young, trusted sidekick and girlfriend, who often acted as his lookout and helped with receipt frauds. There was Balum Kashongwe, a neighbor from the Congo who was brought in as muscle and an extra set of hands. He had accomplices like Lance Ulmer, an Edmonton businessman who allowed his shipping company to be used for financial crimes, and his own cousin, Dale Fedoruk, who handled high-powered weapons shipments. And looming over them all was a shadowy, terrifying figure known only to Interpol as the Boss. The Boss was a highly secretive, London-based mastermind who ran a massive international credit card fraud syndicate, reportedly funneling money to rebel militias in the Middle East. Gerald Blanchard was no longer just a kid stealing from Radio Shack. He was entering the criminal major leagues. You might be wondering how a man could pull something like this off. But we haven't even gotten to the bigger heists and the more ingenious plans yet. When you see how even a heist mastermind of this caliber sometimes makes mistakes, you'll start to wonder whether Gerald is a genius or a fool. You might be asking yourself, why? By his mid-20s, Gerald had millions stashed in bank accounts across the globe. He had luxury properties, sports cars, and over 20 different aliases. He was Evan Howland, James Gaiman, Daniel Wall. He didn't need to steal anymore. He rarely even spent the money he stole, preferring to hoard it. But for Gerald, it was never really about the money. It was about power. It was about revenge. And above all, it was about his ego. Remember that bank that foreclosed on his childhood home? Gerald developed a profound, deep-seated grudge against financial institutions. He justified his actions by stating, "I like stealing from the banks and corporations. The reason why I don't like stealing from people is because they work hard for the money." He remembered his mother crying because they couldn't turn the lights on, and he weaponized that trauma. But deeper than his anger was a psychological addiction to the thrill. Gerald possessed a compulsive need to prove that he was the smartest person in the room. He viewed bank security not as an obstacle, but as a puzzle. He literally called it a chess game, where you had to know 10 moves ahead of the police. He wanted to mock the authorities. That's why he recorded over 120 videotapes of his own crimes, filming the cash, the vaults, and his own face, just to document his undeniable brilliance for himself. He wasn't just a thief, he was an adrenaline junkie, addicted to outsmarting the system. He always scaled his crimes carefully, ensuring he never used a gun so that his potential prison time would be minimized if caught. His calculated mastery was about to unfold in Winnipeg.
Tonight, a sophisticated robbery at a CIBC branch in the Polo Park area.
The CIBC branch in Empress Street hadn't even opened yet, but its automatic teller machines were already...
ATMs were robbed while the bank was still under construction. More than $500,000 was stolen.
It's May 2004. A massive, brand-new branch of the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, CIBC, is being built in a Winnipeg suburb. It's a multi-million-dollar facility. Gerald realized something fundamental. A bank is just a system of rules. Vaults have time locks, cameras have blind spots. The only unpredictable variable is the human response. Most criminals rob a bank and run away before the cops arrive. Gerald flipped the script. He invented what he called the reverse stakeout. While the bank was still a construction site, Gerald posed as a construction worker. He walked into Home Depot, bought a safety vest and a hard hat, and strolled right past the site managers. In the dead of night, he infiltrated the ATM room. He didn't steal anything yet. Instead, he planted his own massive surveillance network. He installed a $50 baby monitor from Toys R Us inside the air conditioning ducts. He hid pinhole cameras in the ceiling, pointing directly at the bank manager's desk and the alarm keypad. For weeks, Gerald sat in his rented van down the street, listening and watching. He even brought adult diapers with him so he wouldn't have to leave his surveillance post for bathroom breaks. He learned the security guards' patrol routes. He watched the manager type in the alarm code, memorizing the 6 digits. He even triggered a false alarm on purpose, just to time the police with a stopwatch. They arrived in exactly 8 minutes. 8-minute window minimum, he noted. The night before the grand opening, the ATMs were loaded with cash. At 12:04 a.m., Gerald struck. His girlfriend Angela was down the street with a walkie-talkie. Gerald entered the bank, typed in the stolen code, and bypassed the alarms. He had practiced opening the exact models of these ATMs, Maz Hamilton and Lagarde locks, on a machine he bought at an auction and kept in his garage. He had completely reverse-engineered the mechanisms. With surgical precision, he popped the faces off the machines without causing any telltale damage. 4 minutes in, 3 machines emptied. 6 minutes in, 6 machines emptied. He deliberately left the 7th machine untouched, a brilliant psychological trick to confuse the police into thinking the thief was interrupted. At 7 minutes, he zipped up his duffel bag containing exactly $750,000. He walked out, locked the door behind him, and drove away with his headlights off. When the police arrived 8 minutes later, they found locked doors and no broken glass. They radioed dispatch. False alarm, premises secure. Sitting in an alley 3 blocks away, listening through his baby monitor, Gerald smiled. He had just made the police guard an empty crime scene. By 2006, Gerald's boundless ambition led him into much darker, more dangerous waters. The boss, the London mastermind, contacted Gerald for the biggest job of his life. The destination? Cairo, Egypt. The mission was simple but incredibly risky. The boss provided Gerald and his team with over 1,000 cloned credit cards. They were to hit every ATM in Cairo, drain the daily limits, and vanish. Gerald, Angela, and their associate Baloum flew to Egypt and checked into a luxury hotel on the Nile. To avoid the security cameras, the team dressed in full burqas, hiding their faces as they hit the machines for 12 hours a day. Back in their hotel room, the stacks of cash grew so high they reached 2 meters tall. They were raking in millions. But then, greed tore the team apart. The Egyptian ATMs had low daily limits, so Gerald sent Baloum to Nairobi, Kenya, with 50 cards to test the machines there. Baloum never came back. He took the cards and a bag filled with $50,000 in cash and diamonds, and vanished into Africa. When the boss found out, he was absolutely furious. Gerald and Angela were suddenly taken hostage by the boss's armed men right in the middle of Cairo. For days, Gerald's life hung by a thread. Using every ounce of his manipulative charm, he managed to negotiate his life by giving up his entire share of the stolen money to cover Baloum's theft, and fled back to Canada in December 2006. He had survived the lethal underworld, but he was about to face a much more relentless enemy. While Gerald was playing James Bond in Egypt, the Winnipeg Police Service was hunting a ghost. Detectives Mitch McCormick and Larry Levasseur had formed Project Kite, a task force dedicated entirely to finding the mastermind behind the CIBC bank heist. For months, they had absolutely nothing. The thief was too good. He used 22 different aliases like Daniel Wall and James A. Gaiman, but then they found a single, miraculous clue. Do you remember when I said he made a ridiculously simple, amateur mistake? Days before the CIBC heist, an ordinary Walmart employee working across the street noticed a suspicious van parked near the bank. The employee wrote the license plate number on a napkin. When the detectives ran the plate, they found out the van was a rental, and the man who rented it used his real name, Gerald Daniel Blanchard. The genius who wiretapped the police, who built replica ATMs in his garage, who parachuted onto an Austrian palace, signed the rental agreement for his getaway vehicle with his actual ID. Associate Chief Justice Jeffrey Oliphant later laughed in court, calling it pretty dumb leaving that car sitting there in your name. This single loose thread unraveled his entire empire. The police immediately tapped his phones. They listened as he bragged to his associates about the Cairo job, the weapon shipments, and even the CC Star theft. On January 23, 2007, at 4:30 a.m., the hammer finally fell. A 12-man SWAT team breached Gerald's luxury condo in Vancouver. Flashbangs detonated. Gerald dove for a window but found a wall of assault rifles waiting for him. Inside his apartments and storage units across Canada, the police found 10 pallets of evidence. High-powered scanners, 60,000 forged documents, 30 fake passports, disguises, weapons, and the ultimate prize, 120 videotapes of Gerald documenting his own crimes. The game was over. Gerald was released on parole in 2010 after serving just a fraction of his time. For a while, it seemed the world's greatest thief had gone straight. He started working as a security consultant, ironically getting paid by banks to show them how to stop people exactly like him. He even became a successful drone operator and an advocate for exotic cats. But, as they say, old habits die hard. In March 2017, the criminal mastermind who once parachuted onto an Austrian palace to steal royal jewels, the man who stole millions from international banks, was arrested in Burlington, Ontario. His crime? Trying to steal PlayStations from a local Best Buy under the alias Rick White. Perhaps he missed the thrill. Perhaps the addiction to taking what wasn't his, the rush of the chess game, simply couldn't be cured. Today, Gerald Blanchard is a free man, living a mostly quiet life in his 50s. But when asked recently by a reporter if he would ever rob a bank again, he smiled and said, "You can never say never. It's a spur-of-the-moment decision, and things are always there."